My neighbor's dog ruined my garden. When I complained, she accused me of poisoning it. I'm a 34-year-old woman, and my little backyard garden is my pride. It's not just a hobby, it's therapy. Rows of tomatoes, herbs, flowers, even a small patch of strawberries I'd been nurturing for months. Every morning before work, I'd step outside with my coffee and water the plants, breathing in the calm before the chaos of the day. It was my safe space. My neighbor, Linda, moved in last year with her golden retriever, Max. At first, things were fine, she seemed friendly enough, we waved in passing, even exchanged baked goods once. But then Max discovered my garden. He's a big dog, full of energy, and Linda never keeps him on a leash in her yard. More than once, I'd come home to find him trampling through my flower beds, digging up the soil, tearing out plants I'd spent weeks caring for. The first few times, I let it slide. I told myself, it's just a dog. He doesn't know better. But when I stepped outside one morning and found half my strawberry patch destroyed, green shoots broken, soil scattered everywhere, something inside me broke. I marched over to Linda's door, dirt still on my hands, and told her straight, "Linda, your dog is ruining my garden. You need to keep him out of my yard." She didn't apologize. She didn't even look guilty. Instead, she rolled her eyes and said, "Maybe you shouldn't plant so close to the fence. He's just being playful." I was stunned. Playful? Those strawberries were gone. My tulips had been shredded. Playful or not, her dog was destroying something I loved. I tried to be patient, but the pattern continued. A week later, I caught Max tearing into my herb bed while Linda stood there, scrolling on her phone. I yelled across the fence, "Can you please control your dog?" She sighed like I was the problem, dragged him away, and muttered something about me being too uptight. That was the moment I realized Linda wasn't just careless, she didn't care at all. So the next time Max destroyed another corner of my garden, I snapped. I stormed over to her yard, told her this was unacceptable, and warned her that if she didn't keep him out, I'd have no choice but to call animal control. And that's when everything turned. Linda's face darkened, and she hissed, "Don't you dare threaten me. If Max gets sick, I'll know it was you. You look like the type who'd poison a dog." I was speechless. I'd spent weeks tolerating her negligence, months trying to salvage my plants, and now she was accusing me of being some kind of monster who'd hurt her dog. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a dog or a garden anymore, it was about war. After Linda accused me of wanting to poison her dog, I couldn't even speak. My jaw literally dropped. I stood there in shock, soil still on my gloves, trying to process what she had just said. I expected defensiveness, maybe denial, but to jump straight to an accusation of cruelty? It was like she'd been waiting for an excuse to paint me as the villain. I went back inside that day shaking with anger. My partner, Mark, found me pacing the kitchen. When I told him what happened, he frowned and said, "She's crossing a line. You need to start documenting everything." He was right. Up until then, I had avoided confrontation, hoping it would resolve itself, but Linda had shown me exactly how far she was willing to go. The next week was pure tension. I installed a small security camera facing the garden, partly to deter Max, but mostly to protect myself. If Linda was going to spread accusations, I wanted evidence that I wasn't the aggressor. I told myself it was precautionary, but in reality, I felt hunted. And sure enough, things escalated. It started with whispers. Another neighbor, Mrs. Grant from across the street, pulled me aside one afternoon. "I don't know if it's true," she said carefully, "but Linda mentioned you and her dog. She implied you might have tried to harm him." My stomach dropped. The poison accusation wasn't just an outburst, it was a story she was feeding to the neighborhood. I tried to explain, but I could see doubt in Mrs. Grant's eyes. It didn't matter that I'd never hurt an animal in my life. Once a seed like that is planted, it's hard to uproot. Then came the passive-aggressive comments. I'd be in my garden, watering my tomatoes, and Linda would stroll by with Max, loud enough for me to hear, "Stay close, Max, we don't want anyone trying to hurt you." Sometimes she'd glance directly at me, smiling that fake, poisonous smile. One evening, as I was carrying groceries inside, I overheard her talking to another neighbor on the sidewalk. Her voice was low but sharp. "She's obsessed with that stupid garden. People like that snap, you know? I wouldn't be surprised if she did something to Max out of spite." That cut deeper than I expected. Gardening was my safe space, my therapy. To twist it into something sinister, to make me sound dangerous, that was deliberate cruelty. I started noticing how people looked at me differently. A few neighbors stopped waving. Someone I'd chatted with casually for years kept their distance when walking their dog past my yard. And Linda? She was thriving on it. Every time she saw me, she wore that smug look, like she was winning some invisible battle. Meanwhile, Max kept getting into my garden. Even with new fencing, even with me being careful, he'd find a way in. One morning, I came out to find my basil flattened, my peppers pulled up by the roots. The camera caught him in the act, tail wagging, paws tearing through soil, while Linda stood nearby, sipping coffee, doing nothing. I printed screenshots from the footage and brought them to her door. My hands were trembling as I knocked. When she opened, I shoved the photos at her. "This is proof your dog is destroying my property. If it happens again, I'm filing a formal complaint." She barely glanced at them before smirking. "Go ahead. File your little complaint. Everyone already knows what you're capable of." It was like being gaslit by an entire neighborhood. I was the victim, but somehow she was twisting it so I looked like the threat. That night, lying awake, I realized I had two choices. I could retreat, give up my garden, let her control the narrative, or I could fight back, not just to protect my plants, but to clear my name. And something in me decided I wasn't going to let Linda win. The night after Linda brushed me off with that smirk, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the screenshots from my security camera. My plants were torn up in every image, Max bounding through my garden like it was his personal playground, and Linda just standing there with her coffee. The evidence was undeniable, but the truth didn't seem to matter when she had already poisoned the neighbor's perception of me. Mark sat across from me, shaking his head. "She's not just careless, she's manipulative. If you let this slide, she'll keep pushing until everyone believes you're the crazy one." That word hit me. Crazy. That's exactly how she wanted me to look, the obsessive garden lady who hated dogs. The more I thought about it, the more furious I became. My garden wasn't just plants in the dirt, it was hours of work, a place that kept me grounded through stress, even grief. After my father passed, I'd thrown myself into tending the soil he once taught me how to love. And now Linda was destroying it, and destroying my reputation too. I knew I needed allies. So I reached out to the Grants across the street first. I brought over a basket of vegetables and herbs I'd managed to salvage, knocked on their door, and when Mrs. Grant invited me in, I laid everything out, the photos, the video clips, the accusations. She watched the footage with a hand over her mouth, then sighed. I knew she was exaggerating, but I didn't realize it was this bad. Her husband spoke up then, leaning forward in his chair. "We've had our suspicions about Linda since she moved in. She complains about everyone, noise, parking, trash cans. I wouldn't be surprised if she's targeting you because she knows you won't back down." That gave me a sliver of relief. I wasn't completely alone. Over the next week, I discreetly shared the evidence with a few other neighbors I trusted. Each time, I kept my tone calm, matter of fact, like I wasn't begging them to believe me, just showing the truth. Slowly, I saw their faces shift from suspicion to sympathy. "So she accused you of poisoning Max? That's insane. You clearly love your garden." It didn't erase the damage, but it started tipping the balance. Linda must have sensed it, because she escalated. One morning, I stepped outside to find a handwritten note taped to my gate in sloppy cursive: "Stay away from my dog. We're watching you." My hand shook as I peeled it off. It was vague, threatening, and worst of all, it made it clear she wasn't going to stop until she'd completely painted me as the villain. That was the moment I decided to go official. I called animal control and filed a report. I handed over the footage, the timestamps, everything. The officer I spoke to was professional but firm. If her dog is repeatedly trespassing and damaging property, she'll be held accountable. And false accusations, especially of poisoning, are taken seriously. It felt like my first real victory. But Linda wasn't done. That afternoon, I caught her in the driveway yelling loud enough for half the block to hear, "She's trying to get Max taken away. She hates him. She hates dogs." She made it sound like I was some kind of monster who wanted her pet killed. Neighbors peeked out of windows, some shaking their heads, others just watching. I stood there on my porch, fists clenched, biting back the urge to scream back. Instead, I raised my phone and held it up, recording every second of her outburst. She saw me, faltered for a split second, then stormed back inside with Max in tow. That night, I sent the clip to Animal Control and CC'd the HOA board. If she wanted to play loud, I could play louder, with receipts. By then, I realized this wasn't just a petty neighbor squabble. It was a full-scale character assassination, and if I didn't fight smart, I could lose not only my garden but my standing in the neighborhood I'd worked so hard to be part of. So I began preparing for the inevitable showdown, collecting every piece of proof, building my case, and waiting for the right moment to expose her the same way she tried to expose me. Because Linda thought she was waging a quiet little smear campaign. But what she didn't know was that I was about to turn her own lies back on her, in front of everyone. The week leading up to the confrontation felt like waiting for a storm. On the surface, the street looked calm, kids riding bikes, sprinklers hissing across lawns, but underneath it, everyone knew something was brewing. Neighbors whispered, glances lingered too long, and every time Linda walked Max, she made a point of passing my yard slowly, staring like she was daring me to react. I didn't bite. I kept watering my plants, trimming back the roses, acting as though I didn't notice. But inside, my anger was boiling so hot it scared me. She wasn't just destroying my garden anymore, she was actively trying to destroy me. Then came the tipping point. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day where half the neighborhood was outside mowing, washing cars, chatting on porches. I was in my garden, replanting some of the basil Max had ruined, when I heard Linda's voice carry across the fence. Loud, dramatic, meant for an audience. "Max, baby, don't go near that side. We don't want anyone trying to hurt you." My blood froze. I looked up, and sure enough, she was standing there with two other neighbors, stroking Max's head like some tragic victim in a bad play. The women beside her looked uncomfortable, but Linda pressed on. "You know, some people just don't like animals. Some people would rather poison them than take responsibility for their fragile little gardens." That was it. That was the moment my patience snapped in half. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my gloves, and walked right to the fence. My voice came out steady, louder than I expected. "Linda, if you're going to accuse me of something that serious, you better be ready to back it up in front of everyone." Her smile flickered, but she doubled down. "Oh, I don't need to prove anything. Everyone knows what you're like." I could feel the eyes of half the block on us. This was it, the showdown I'd been preparing for. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. "Actually, Linda, I can prove something. Want to see?" The women beside her hesitated. Maybe this isn't, one started, but I didn't stop. I opened the gallery and played the dashcam clips first. Max barreling through my garden, dirt flying, Linda in the background sipping coffee, doing absolutely nothing. Then the photos, plants flattened, roots torn, timestamps clearly matching the night she swore Max had been inside. Gasps rippled through the small crowd that had gathered without me realizing. People moved closer, murmuring. But I wasn't done. I hit play on the recording from the other night, the one where Linda had screamed in the driveway that I wanted Max taken away. Her voice blared through the speaker, shrill and venomous. And then, as silence fell, I showed the note taped to my gate, "Stay away from my dog. We're watching you." "Funny thing," I said, holding it up for everyone to see, "Animal Control has a copy of this now. Along with all the footage. Along with your little driveway performance." Linda's face went pale. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The women beside her stepped back slightly, eyes wide. One of them muttered, "Linda, this doesn't look good." I felt my heart pounding, but I didn't stop. "You've been spreading lies about me for weeks. You've been accusing me of poisoning your dog while letting him destroy my yard over and over." "I've kept quiet, but I'm done. The next time you so much as whisper my name in connection with harming Max, I'll make sure it's not just the neighborhood hearing about it. It'll be animal control. It'll be legal." The crowd was silent, all eyes on her. Linda's bravado cracked right in front of everyone. She stammered, I was just protecting Max." "No," I cut her off. "You were smearing me to protect yourself. And now everyone sees the truth." For the first time since this mess started, I felt the power shift. I wasn't the one on the defensive anymore. She was. And she knew it. She yanked Max's leash and stormed back into her house without another word, leaving a trail of stunned silence behind her. I looked around, suddenly aware of how many people had gathered, neighbors from 3 different houses, all staring at me like they'd just witnessed a trial. Some nodded at me, others muttered things like "unbelievable" and "she went too far." For the first time in weeks, I felt something that had been stolen from me: credibility. That night, my phone buzzed with texts from neighbors I barely knew. "Good for you. She needed to be called out. I can't believe she lied like that." It wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time, Linda wasn't the one controlling the story. And I knew the real fallout hadn't even begun. The silence that followed Linda's retreat was almost eerie. For weeks, she'd strutted around the block with her head high, feeding her narrative to anyone who would listen. But after I laid out the receipts in front of half the street, that confidence evaporated in real time. Still, I knew her. She wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. And I was right. The very next day, I caught her outside talking to a couple with a toddler, whispering furiously, waving her hands in my direction. When she noticed me watching, she raised her voice just enough. "Well, you never know with people like her. Some people look normal but they're unstable." Unstable. That word stung because it was calculated. It wasn't about Max anymore, it was about me, my character, my sanity. She wanted me branded as the crazy neighbor. But this time, something changed. The couple didn't nod along. They glanced at me, then back at her, their faces skeptical. Finally the husband said, "Linda, we saw the footage. Max was in her yard. Maybe you should take some responsibility?" The wife added softly, "And accusing someone of poisoning a dog without proof is serious." Linda's face tightened, her lips pursed like she'd swallowed vinegar. She yanked Max's leash and stormed off without another word. That was the moment I knew the tide had turned. In the following days, the atmosphere on the block shifted. People who had been distant started greeting me again. A few even came over with quiet words of support. Mrs. Grant brought me a pie and whispered, "She's lost the neighborhood, dear. Everyone's talking about how reckless she is with Max." And as if to prove it, Max kept escaping. Twice that week, I caught him digging near my fence again. This time, though, I didn't rush to fix it. I just calmly sent the footage straight to animal control with timestamps and location data. By the 3rd report, they called me directly. "Ma'am," the officer said, "we've issued a formal warning. If her dog trespasses again without restraint, she could be fined, or worse, Max could be removed for his own safety." Hearing that gave me no joy. I love animals, the last thing I wanted was for Max to suffer because of her negligence. But I also knew it wasn't my responsibility to shield her from the consequences of her own choices. When the letter from Animal Control arrived at her door, I happened to be weeding my garden. I watched from across the fence as she opened it, read the notice, and crumpled it in her fist, her face twisting with fury. She spotted me and spat out, "You think you've won, don't you?" I didn't even look up from the soil. "No, Linda. I just think the truth finally caught up with you." For once, she had no comeback. But she wasn't finished. 2 nights later, Mark woke me up around midnight. "Look outside," he whispered. I pulled back the curtain and froze. There was Linda, in the glow of a streetlight, pacing along the fence line with her phone out, filming my yard. We stepped onto the porch. "What the hell are you doing?" Mark called out. She whirled around, eyes wild. "I'm documenting. In case something happens to Max, I want it on record that you're the ones responsible." At that moment, I realized she wasn't just manipulative, she was unraveling. The public humiliation, the warning from animal control, the neighbors pulling away, it was all cracking her carefully constructed mask. I raised my phone and filmed her right back. "Perfect, now we both have evidence," I said calmly. "Go home, Linda." She stood frozen, breathing hard, then finally stormed back to her house. The next morning, I woke up to messages from two neighbors who'd seen her the night before. One wrote, "She's losing it. Everyone knows now." Another said, "If she keeps harassing you, we'll back you up." For the first time in months, I felt the weight on my chest start to lift. I wasn't alone anymore. The lies she'd spread were collapsing in on her, and the community she'd tried to turn against me was now watching her with suspicion. But part of me knew the real ending hadn't happened yet. Because people like Linda don't just disappear quietly, they implode. And when she finally did, the fallout would be louder than anything that came before. It didn't take long for Linda's implosion to arrive. Looking back, I think she was clinging so hard to her lies that when the neighborhood stopped believing her, she had nowhere left to put her anger but outward. And it came out fast, messy, and public. The first real explosion happened at the next HOA meeting. Our block has these monthly gatherings in the community center, mostly people arguing about lawn lengths and trash pickup schedules. I usually avoided them, but after everything that had happened, I decided to show up. And thank God I did. Linda was already there, sitting in the front row with Max at her feet like he was Exhibit A. When the floor opened for neighborhood concerns, she shot her hand up so fast it was almost comical. "Yes," she said, standing tall, voice quivering with fake emotion, "I'd like to bring up the harassment I've endured from my neighbor." Every head turned toward me. I felt my stomach twist, but I kept my face calm. "She has been targeting me for months," Linda continued. "She's obsessed with her garden and has made up lies about my dog. She's even tried to get animal control to take him away, and when I tried to defend myself, she turned the whole neighborhood against me. She gestured dramatically to Max, "If anything ever happens to him, you'll all know who's responsible." A few people murmured, but this time it wasn't sympathy. It was annoyance. I stood slowly, holding a folder I'd brought with me. My voice was steady. "I'd like to respond." Linda rolled her eyes. "Of course you would." I opened the folder and began passing around printed screenshots, photos of Max tearing through my plants, timestamps from the camera footage, the text of the animal control warnings. "These are documented incidents," I said evenly. "This isn't about harassment. This is about repeated damage to my property and false accusations." And as for the claim that I want to harm her dog, I held up the note she'd taped to my gate, sealed in a plastic sleeve. "I think it's clear who's actually threatening who." The room went silent. Neighbors flipped through the papers, shaking their heads. One older man cleared his throat and said, "Linda, this looks pretty bad." For the first time, I watched her mask crack. She sputtered, She forged those." "She's framing me." "Linda," the HOA president interrupted firmly, "these are official documents from animal control. And we've all seen the videos. Enough is enough." Murmurs of agreement rippled across the room. Someone muttered, "She's lost it." Another said outright, "I don't want Max in my yard either." "Control your dog." Linda's face went red, her chest heaving. Finally, she snapped. "Fine. Fine. You all want to side with her? Then when something happens to Max, don't say I didn't warn you." She yanked his leash and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That was the last HOA meeting she ever attended. After that, the neighborhood's patience with her evaporated. Parents stopped letting their kids play with Max because they didn't trust Linda's temper. People avoided her at the mailbox. She became the subject of whispers, but this time it wasn't about me, It was about her unraveling in front of everyone. Within weeks, I noticed the for sale sign go up in her yard. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a wave of relief. She moved out quietly, no goodbyes, no explanations. Just packed up, left, and took her chaos with her. The day the moving truck pulled away, I walked into my garden and stood there in the quiet. For the first time in months, I felt peace. My plants weren't trampled. My reputation wasn't under attack. The neighborhood felt lighter, like it had collectively exhaled. Max barked once from the truck, tail wagging as it disappeared down the street. My chest ached, not for Linda, never for her, but for the dog who had never asked to be a pawn in her game. After she left, neighbors started stopping by again. Mrs. Grant hugged me and said, "You handled yourself with more grace than most of us could have. She tried to poison us against you, and in the end, she poisoned herself." I smiled faintly but didn't say much. Because the truth is, even though I'd won, the whole ordeal left scars. Nights when I hear a dog bark, I still tense up. When I see someone glance at my garden too long, I wonder if another accusation is coming. But then I walk between the rows of tomatoes, touch the leaves of the basil I replanted, breathe in the smell of earth, and remember why I fought so hard. My garden is still here. I'm still here. And no amount of lies could take that away from me. So yes, my neighbor's dog ruined my garden. And yes, she accused me of poisoning him. But in the end, the truth stood taller than her lies. And every morning now, when I sip my coffee among the flowers, I remind myself, sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling louder. It's letting the truth bloom where everyone can see it.
Follow me for more stories.